Hello and welcome to yet another video, and in this video it is something a little bit different than usual because in this video I'll be talking about this camera, which is a replacement to this camera that I have, which is my most unreliable yet one of my favorite film cameras that I have, which is the Mamiya 645 1000S. If you've watched that video, you'll know that I have problem with the shutter curtain itself, which a lot of people seem to think that it's just the multiple shutter that I don't know how to use. It's not the problem, it's just a typical problem of the 1000S series compared to the 500 shutter speed version, because yeah, the shutter isn't really that reliable at all. But I got a replacement and I really love it, and in this video I'll be sharing with you my thoughts on this, why I recommend looking into it, and yeah, where I'm coming from and what I think about it. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the Mamiya 645 Pro, now this camera has a lot of design changes compared to the original Mamiya 645, which is this one. You know, this one looks more classic, it's from the 70s, and you know, the design language wise, this one is just like one whole camera that you can only change certain bits like the viewfinder, the lenses, things like that, but you can't really change the film backs, whereas with this one you can. And you can also do that with the 645 Super as well. That being said, I really went for this model because at the time I got really lucky that getting it for 500 euros. Actually, about 2 or 3 times a month here in the Netherlands and also in Germany, where I'm from, you can actually find around 3 of these for, well, a month for about 500 euros or 550 euros, but usually they go for about 750 to 900 euros depending on the condition and also what kind of seller they are. Obviously this was a private seller and he just wanted to get rid of the camera because he wasn't using it much, and yeah, you do have those sellers, and since this was pretty much mass produced as well, you still have a lot of these available out there nowadays that you still can find for a very reasonable deal as well. I just find that the 800 or 750 euros is kind of a little bit too much for this particular camera. If I'm spending that much, I might as well just save a little bit more and get a Hasselblad or something like that. But anyway, into the video as usual. I'll be splitting it into 3 different sections. The first one is the ergonomics, usability, the design, and then leading into the image quality and my conclusion about this camera. So, this camera, the ergonomics, the usability, despite being plastic and sometimes feels very plasticky, it actually feels very tough in the same time. I think it's actually due to the weight. If you do take the motorized grip off, which this camera is quite modular, the weight does reduce quite a bit. And talking about this grip, the actual sound of the motor is really loud. I do, however, love the convenience of having that motorized grip because it does give me that, you know, grip, but also the benefit of winding from the motor itself, so I don't always have to think about winding. It doesn't take a lot of effort, but you know, it takes one worry away from the action of taking a picture, if that makes sense. So let's say if I'm taking a picture of some portraits and I don't really feel like, you know, taking my hand off the actual shutter button, I can actually just keep it on, whereas with the winder I would have to take my hand off the shutter button. Well, I'm right-handed, and this also really subjectively depends on how you hold the camera, because there's another shutter button right down here, just like the other Mamiya. So yeah, there is that. Yeah, it's less shakiness for me if I want to just continue taking pictures. There is that. You can also change the actual viewfinder. I think there's also another viewfinder available with kind of like a longer finder that's protruding out a little bit, so that's actually quite nice. And you can also get those kind of finder that you have to look down, like, you know, one of the TLRs as well, so that's also quite nice. But having owned TLR in the past, I really didn't like that kind of viewfinder, and I very much prefer this kind of viewfinder. It's very much like how I would use my DSLRs, my film SLRs, my mirrorless cameras. So I'm very much used to this, and to me personally, I can get more precise focusing when using this kind of finder. Talking about finder and precise focusing, I do wish that the actual focusing screen is a bit brighter and clearer. Of course, you can always buy extra accessories. And talking about extra accessories, I have just two. One is another focusing screen, and this is just the winder, or they call it the L grip holder, or the multiple angle grip. It's just a winder, to be honest. Those are the two accessories that I do have. I'm actually currently trying to order another back, but I just missed a very good deal, so I'm just waiting for another good deal to come around, because the good deals are usually around 60 to 80 euros depending on the condition, but people tend to want to sell it for about 100 to 120 euros, which is kind of too expensive for a back, to be honest, a film back. But anyway, back to the focusing screen. I do find it a little bit too dark, especially for this kind of camera, and especially for this class of camera that came out, you know, at the time. Of course, the only other reference I can refer to is a 35mm camera, but I wish a lot of film cameras would have a very similar focusing screen as, let's say, the f1, f2, f3, f4 from Nikon, because those are some of the clearest focusing screen I've ever seen in the viewfinder. Because if you cannot get sharp, or like crystal sharp focusing on those cameras, there is something wrong with you, or the subject is just moving way too fast. But it's so clear that even with a very low contrast lens, you have to make an effort to go out of focus not to get the in focus image, if that makes sense. Whereas with this one, it's like sometimes I know that I got it in focus, but I just have to go a little bit out of focus and then come back to make sure that it was 100% in focus. So that is somewhat really unclear to me personally. Or maybe it's just because I also use a lot of film SLRs that have clearer screens that I can focus on. Whereas this one is just, it's not bad, it's not that bad, but it's also nowhere near as good as some of the other SLRs. So yeah, there's that. That's something that I really have to get used to. That being said, you know, if once you're used to it, then you can get actually into the rhythm and then get really nice shots out of this particular viewfinder. So that's actually pretty nice. And moving to the next point, the shutter sound, because I talked about the motorized sound being very loud, but if you don't want to have that motorized sound, just take this off. Imagine that the L winder is here. The actual shutter sound is actually very silent. Not too silent, but still much better than having that motorized sound. Yeah, that one will definitely scare your subject away, whereas the first one, your subject will not really care too much about it. And if you're, let's say, just moving along in like a fresh market or on a street, things like that, the street sound will most likely be able to cut away most of the shutter sound, whereas the motor sound, it will speak quite loud on its own. So just be careful when you're doing street photography or just photographing outdoor or in certain spaces where sound might be a little bit more sensitive if you want to use the motor. There's that. But I'm actually very happy that the shutter on this one is very, very precise and also very, very reliable. I think you kind of expect it to be, since it's the pro level, and also it came out much, much later than the other one. A lot of people, well, actually read that a lot of people had concerns about this camera being plastic built. That being said, I think even compared to the 645 1000S, a lot of people prefer that, at least on the forums, over this one because of the build quality and how it feels in hands. Personally, my take on it is that this is a much newer technology, and it is the pro line of cameras from Mamiya at the time. So I do think that, you know, at least with the shutter curtain and also some of the mechanical parts inside are built more reliably than the other ones, since I've only so far have experienced good things from this camera and how much more reliable it is and how much more unreliable the other camera is on the other side of the forum on the internet, and I'm also experiencing how unreliable the other camera is. So to me, despite being plastic, it is still a much more reliable camera in my experience than the original design. So personally, I don't have any fear using this camera as a plastic camera. And also this camera is very, very modular, so you can actually switch a lot of things out anyway. Should one day the motor not function anymore, knock on wood of course, then at least there are still other accessories out there that I can actually replace it with. And also the film back here, even though it is replaceable, so I have to put this card back here actually. Even though it is replaceable, another advantage you have with this particular feature that you can change the film back is so that you don't need to finish the film roll in here. You can actually just use a different film on a different film back and then just attach it on here, and it's actually very, very secure, and that's actually very nice. And that's something that I've been wanting to have when I was using the other camera, but obviously that camera didn't have the feature and this one does now. So with this camera, another feature I really like is pretty much the safety features in this camera. So for example, this safety card is in and the camera is on, but I actually cannot take any pictures with this when the safety card is still inserted into the camera. I would need to take it out, put it back here, and then I can actually take pictures. So there are actually quite a few safety mechanisms that actually prevents you from, taking accidental shots. So that is something that I also very much like about this particular camera. I also like the fact that the battery check light is now much, much bigger than the other camera. So if I press, you see that light right there? It's much bigger now. Yeah, BC is for battery check. So yeah, not before Christ or anything. Also up here, when you turn your grip, there is the light on the actual camera, which is actually quite nice to have the battery check. And talking about battery check on the grip, it actually takes the 6 AA batteries, so that's actually quite nice. But just because you have batteries in here doesn't mean that you can always take pictures. If you're out of battery in here though, that's the 4LR44 battery, I think it takes. You can double check on that actually. Then it will still not take pictures. So you have to make sure that both batteries are in and they have juice in there so that the camera can both rewind and also take pictures. Because this camera, unlike the other camera, this one actually needs the battery to take pictures. Without the battery in here, the camera will not take any pictures. So yeah, there is that. Just be careful. But otherwise, I do find the control here very minimal, but also very nicely placed in the same time. I really like how all the buttons feels very tactile, very responsive. So yeah, that is something I personally really like. And also the fact that you cannot accidentally roll, let's say, the ISO dial or the exposure compensation dial, the shutter speed. It's just, very nicely locked into place, and also there's somewhat stiffness to it so that you cannot accidentally knock them. So that's actually very nice. So good job on that. And yeah. And now over to the image quality. Well, the image quality, this also depends on the lenses that you have and also the film rolls that you have. But in general, I really love the image quality out of this particular camera and also the setup that I have. I usually just use either the 55mm or the 80mm f2.8. And to be honest, those lenses are sharp enough for me and they cover most of the things I do anyway with these, well, with this camera. By these, I meant just the 645 1000S and this particular model. But, contrast could have been a bit better, but that is something you can also choose different film to actually give you that extra contrast as well. Personally, I like to, well, I'm still exploring different films, and so far the image quality coming out of this camera has been taken with those films that I've been experimenting with. So you're seeing also samples of the shots that, I've never actually used those films before, and also samples of the shots where I wasn't really sure how it will look like on film. So excuse for that, but at least you still can see what this camera can deliver in terms of the image quality, in terms of the sharpness, things like that. Whereas the actual film color, I am still exploring more color films for this particular camera. So far, with this particular format of cameras, I've been loving shooting with black and white, which you can also see from the photo shoot with the other camera. That being said, a photo shoot video is still coming up with this particular camera just later this month. If you are watching it a few months later, then obviously that video would already be out. So yeah, there is that. But otherwise, there's not really much to say about the image quality. It's just very nice on its own. There's no light leaks, as to be expected, and a lot of the images you can actually just, you know, put them in the magazine because it's so timeless and still very clear and still retains a lot of details, as to be expected from the lenses and also from the 120 film, which is, you know, much bigger than the traditional 35mm film as well. So yeah, there's that. Now, leading into the conclusion, overall, I do recommend this camera if you're looking to a medium format camera that actually still deliver great images for somewhat of a budget price. Of course, you can always go with the older from the 1970s, the Mamiya 645. Those will still deliver great results as long as you find, you know, really good copy, really reliable copy of it. And the price on those cameras will be pretty much halved or kind of a fraction of the price that you'd pay with this camera. And of course, if you're just looking into getting into this sort of format of cameras, it's nicer to look into those older Mamiyas as well, because they are cheaper, so that you don't feel like you're investing too much into something that you may or may not like down in the future. But overall, if you are a person that, you know, you would like to get into 120 film, like, you know for sure that you will stick with it. And of course, if you really like this film type on its own and you're committed with it, then of course I really highly recommend this one, because it is a very affordable camera. It is definitely much cheaper than, let's say, the Hasselblad equivalent. And also the lenses on this particular system are actually quite sharp and has a very nice character to them that you can actually enjoy, and also they are quite affordable as well, so you're not actually spending a ton of money on just getting a full kit. I think the money that you're spending on this particular setup is actually going to be quite reasonable, especially for the quality and the type of features you're getting out of this particular camera as well. Everything's responsive, everything is nice at hand, and everything just feels very tactile, very solid in the same time, despite being made of plastic. So yeah, there's that. I hope this video helps somewhat. If not a lot, then a little. If you have any questions, any stories, anything to share at all, please feel free to just comment that down in the comment section down below. Otherwise, if you need a free photography guidebook, it's absolutely for free on my website. Just click the link down in the description section below. So as some of my free photography tutorials as well, and some of the paid ones on there as well, if you're interested. Otherwise, yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Stay safe, have fun shooting. Till next time, bye for now.